how mature is the Indian market as compared to the rest of the world when it comes to understanding how deathcare works, right? So you talked a bit about the Western countries, how deathcare services or funeral services work out there, how things are in India.
Sure. So in India, even though the industry hasn't developed in a very organized manner, I would say, but it is quite prevalent, and this has been happening for since the ancient civilization. When we talk about the Harappa civilization or the Indus Valley civilization,
Hi Rishabh, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Mohit. How are you doing?
Great. So before we start the session, let me set the context and pace of the session today. So we'll be talking about revolutionizing India's death care and the funeral services industry, right? And today we have Mr. Rishabh, CEO of Last Journey Funeral Services, right? So before we, get into the set of questions, I would like to know more about your journey a little bit, Rishabh. So if you can shed some light over there, it'll be great.
Sure, Mohit. So, last journey started approximately 2 years back. And before that, I had worked on my initial job for about 4 to 5 years, where I was heading the digital marketing division for a wedding company. So, heading the digital marketing division for a wedding company sort of made me understand how to deal with emotions in a technological or a modernized fashion. And emotions essentially are of two types, right? I mean, they are either happy or sad. So, Last Journey, I think, caters to the latter part of it, where obviously we understand when a person or a family is in this sort of a situation, they do need help to organize things, and they would want to spend time with the deceased, relive all those moments that they have spent together, and be able to express grief in a much better fashion. So that is where we saw a market gap, and we thought that we should take this pain away of organizing and arranging the last minute rituals from the family members so that they could grieve in peace. That's how Last Journey came into being.
Correct. Interesting. So that brings me to my next question. Like, how prevalent is death care and organized funeral services across Western countries, right?
So, Mohit, in the Western countries, the death care space is as old as the 18th century. The funeral industry stands at about 110 billion as of 2021. And there are so many countries in terms of US, France, Germany, the UK, Australia, Finland, and they have a much more evolved and developed death care structure, so to speak, because there the rituals are also very different compared to the Indian side of things. There, the entire bit is done in a very prayer meeting sort of fashion. There are 200, 300 people that attend each and every individual's funeral out there. So overall, the death care industry in the foreign countries is much more evolved, but I think India in times to come is matching pace, and India is realizing that uh, giving the appropriate amount of time and having the appropriate amount of closure in terms of grieving when such a thing happens is the requirement of the day, and it should be done.
Correct, correct. Interesting, right? So that brings me to my next question. Like, how mature is the Indian market as compared to the rest of the world when it comes to understanding how death care works, right? So you talked a bit about the Western countries, how death care services or funeral services work out there. So if you can just, give a brief about how things are in India.
Sure. So in India, even though the industry hasn't developed in a very organized manner, I would say, but it is quite prevalent, and this has been happening for since the ancient civilization. When we talk about the Harappa civilization or the Indus Valley civilization, I mean, we all have read stories where if a person passed away during those times, they were buried with their possessions that they considered dear, and the possessions that they thought they would be needing in their afterlife, or in the next life going forward. So that was the entire background as to how it was conducted much before. But talking about now, the present times, the as I already mentioned, that the Indian market is developing this new concept and is obviously generating awareness as to how people like Last Journey or companies like Last Journey are present, and how can they leverage such a service so as to ensure that they don't face any last mile hassles, or they don't have to go through the ordeal of doing so many things when faced at such a time.
Correct. Correct. Interesting, but right there, right? So now, can you help me understand what is the solution that you are offering, and how is it different from other players who might be out there in the market?
Yeah, sure, Mohit. So, when I talk about the solutions that Last Journey brings to the fore, they are essentially 360-degree based solution. We are a one-stop solution for each and everything related to the death care space. So, there are three stages of uh, this entire industry, if I may say so. The pre-planning bit, the at-need bit when the death actually happens, and the post-need bit. So when I talk about pre-planning, we have so many people who have actually gone to the extent of pre-planning their death with us, which is a prevalent thing that happens in the foreign countries. It's like taking an insurance of sorts. So we're trying to inculcate that behavior also, because there are so many individuals or seniors whose children live abroad, or they don't have their near and dear ones looking after them constantly. So they have gone out and planned their funerals with us to ensure that their family members or their children don't have to face these last minute hassles. And we are coordinating each and everything, obviously having a spock from their end when such a thing happens. And we also obviously do the funerals or cremations when they actually happen. That is the at need bit. And the post cremation activities in terms of organizing prayer meetings, or just ensuring that in India we call it a shok sabha. So basically, 200 to 300 people who are very close to the deceased, they gather together, they share stories, they share fond memories of the person who's passed away, and overall, it's a very nice and a dignified way of ensuring that you pay your last respects to the person in the most humble and gratifying manner.
Correct. Correct. True. True. Right. So, you have been in this industry since past couple of months or years, right? So, what are the key contributions that you would like to highlight that you have made in the industry so far?
See, Mohit, apart from the entire numbers game, because essentially we are a private company and a startup. So leaving that aside, if I have to talk about contributions, I take real pride in the fact that we have helped over 20,000 families since we have started, and this has been across the 10 cities that we're currently working at. And we have also, one thing that I would like to mention specifically in terms of contribution is we have bought in this concept of death literacy in India, which didn't seem to exist before. We are making believe and doing our small bit in terms of helping people understand that if you want to customize or personalize your funeral according to the person who has passed away, so as to be sure that I did my best in terms of that can encompass serving their favorite food at the prayer meeting, that can encompass playing their favorite songs that they like, so that each and every one is sort of living the life that the person who has passed away is living, and appreciating for something that he held dear to his heart. So these concepts that we are getting in, so that we ensure that people sort of have a very different outlook to a thing like this, I think would be the real contribution that Last Journey is bringing in.
Correct. Interesting, right? So, I'm sure that, when you started, the market was something else, and, the market has also evolved in past couple of years, right? So there might be several trends that you have seen in the market. So if you can talk about some of those, it will be great.
So, are you talking about the Indian market?
Right.
specifically, okay. So the Indian market presently stands at approximately 3.5 billion, I think, Mohit, and which is a long, long way from the initial 1 billion that it was in 2008. So obviously, when we see the trends, it is a growing trend, and with the kind of digitization and technological leveraging that is happening in each and every industry at this point in time, I'm sure that this market is bound to increase and grow manifolds in the coming times.
Correct, correct. Right. So now I wonder, like, there was very severe impact of COVID on all of the industries, right? So how was that for you or largely?
More than for us specifically, Mohit, I would like to say that COVID impacted all of the industries across the board. And we as a team, or we as a company, did realize and get a lot of validation that what we are doing is the need of the hour. I remember that when the second wave was at its peak, the total deaths recorded during COVID in India were approximately 5.5 lakhs, if I'm not wrong. And we were catering to approximately 90 to 100 cases a day. We had people on ground, we had people running mortuary vans, we had funeral directors who were trying to help people just to ensure that their cremation can be done in peace, just to ensure that they would get wood for the pyres, that they would get their mortuary boxes. So, if I talk about bilateral aspect, I think overall it has given the industry a lot of validation that the deathcare industry and space in India does need a lot of looking into. And if I talk about Last Journey in particular, we ourselves learned a lot from that aspect, and I think it humbled us to understand that what we were doing just gives us more motivation to do the same going forward.
Right, right, correct. So, digitization, how it is shaping the death care and funeral service market, right? So I'm sure digitization might affect this industry as well. So if you can help us understand how it is shaping, that will be great.
See, digitization, Mohit, in its very core, is making things accessible to people, from what I understand. And as is the case in most of the industries right now, that people are resorting to digitization to make sure that the general masses have accessibility, have awareness that this sort of a service can be availed, and this sort of a service is at their disposal. So taking things online is just a portion of rebooting the space. But on the company side, I think the vendor management bit and the act of obviously being there for people becomes much more easier. For example, Last Journey is also helping people ensure that they are able to book slots at cremation grounds. There are so many cremation grounds which are completely full during the day, and there are very less electric cremation facilities. So Last Journey has come in, and we are trying to ensure that that particular slot, the timing that a person or a family is looking for, we are able to grant that to them for better planning, so that they don't have to go through the hassle of ensuring or waiting for 3 to 4 hours in a line. So obviously, digitization is something that needs to be done to ensure that people know services like Last Journey are out there and they can avail of them.
Correct, correct. Very well said, right? So now, I believe there are some sustainable cremation practices that Last Journey undertakes. Can you elaborate?
So obviously, when you talk about venturing into a new space, and with the current kind of initiatives being taken by the Indian government, or generally the world government at a macro level, the sustainability is a big factor that each and every business is considering. So same here at Last Journey, we are trying to do our bit as much as we can in terms of ensuring that what we are trying to do for the society, when we are doing that, we also do that in a fashion that we aren't disturbing the general public. So we have taken initiatives where we promote or motivate people to do cremations through electronic chambers, electric cremation, so to speak. We have been working on a concept where for each and every cremation that we do, Last Journey plants a tree in the name of the person or in the name of the deceased, so as to ensure that we are doing our bit to give back to the society. We are also in talks or in plans to have EVs as our mortuary vans, electric vehicles. So I'm sure, I mean, all these things are going to become much more evolved and much more foolproof in times to come. But this is what our thought process has been.
Correct. Interesting, right? So now that brings me to my very last question, right, Rishabh? So where do you position last journey in maybe next 3 years or so?
So, Mohit, I think the question is, I mean, the answer to this question is very simple. Obviously, if you choose to do anything in life, I believe you choose to do that with the motive or with the thought process that you intend on being the best person to do that. So, nothing different at Last Journey. We have the confidence and we aspire to be the pioneer in this industry in India in the next 3 years or even before, for that matter. Our thought process in terms of encompassing this entire industry in a 360-degree way, in terms of helping people, whether that's having a call center to help people whenever they need to get funerals or cremations done, or whether that is opening our own state of the art cremation grounds so as to uplift the entire cremation infrastructure that we have in India at this point in time, or whether it is to ensure that we have a global network for facilitating repatriation facilities for people so that they have that comfort as well. So we are trying to encompass each and everything and not trying to concentrate on one aspect, with the motive that come the next 3 years, as per your question, we would want to be on top and ensure that we are able to achieve the goal and the mission with which we initially set off.
That's truly inspiring, Rishabh, to be very honest. And the work that you are doing is truly amazing, right? So, all the very best for that. It was a pleasure having you here, and it was a very insightful session for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people as well. Right, Rishabh? Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Mohit. Lovely talking to you. I hope we are able to get our messages out to people through this platform also, and people realize that we are here with them in their times of grief, and we'll do our best to help them in the best way.